Celine Carmichael stood in her kitchen, feeling the familiar ache in her lower back as she leaned over the stovetop. At 65, her body had begun to protest the long hours spent cooking and cleaning, but today wasn't about her discomfort. It was Leo's 7th birthday, and everything had to be perfect. She pushed a strand of her silver hair behind her ear and adjusted the flame under the pot of hot water for pasta. 40 years of marriage to Thomas had taught her that imperfection was not tolerated in the Carmichael household. 40 years of trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother to Alice, and now the perfect grandmother to Leo. 40 years of slowly disappearing into the background of her own life. "Mom, are the cupcakes ready? The kids are getting restless," Alice called from the living room, her voice carrying that edge of impatience that always made Celine's shoulders tense. "Almost done, dear," Celine replied, her voice steady despite the flutter of anxiety in her chest. She glanced at the clock, 2:37 p.m. The party had officially started at 2:00, but she'd been cooking since dawn. Before retiring, Celine had been an elementary school teacher, a career she'd loved but had cut short to focus on family needs. Now she taught English online part-time to students overseas, a small connection to her former life that she maintained in early mornings before Thomas woke up. The modest income went into a separate account, her emergency fund, as she privately called it. From the living room came the tinkling laughter of Miranda, her presence in their home still a source of confusion and hurt for Celine. The woman with her perfectly styled sandy blonde bob had appeared in their lives 6 months ago, an old flame from Thomas's past who had somehow weaseled her way into family gatherings. The way Thomas's eyes followed Miranda across a room made Celine feel invisible, even more than usual. "Grandma, I need more juice." Leo bounded into the kitchen, his hair freshly cut with a bright green streak at the front, Alice's idea of letting him express himself. He waved his plastic sword in the air, making swooshing sounds. "Careful in the kitchen, sweetie," Celine cautioned, reaching for his cup. "I'm handling hot." It happened in an instant. Leo spun around, his sword slashing through the air, bumping into Celine just as she lifted the pot of boiling water to drain the pasta. The collision sent scalding water cascading across her chest. The pain was immediate and blinding. Celine screamed. The pot clattered to the floor. Leo's eyes widened in horror. Thomas rushed into the kitchen, followed by Alice and Miranda. Celine clutched at her soaked blouse, the fabric searing against her burned skin. "What happened?" Thomas demanded, his eyes darting from the mess on the floor to Celine. "The water had spilled my chest." Celine gasped, tears streaming down her face. Thomas's expression shifted from concern to annoyance in the span of a heartbeat. "He's just a kid. Celine, don't blow this out of proportion." Alice scooped up Leo, who had started crying, more frightened by the commotion than remorseful. "Mom, you're scaring him," she hissed, rubbing Leo's back as he buried his face in her shoulder. "Leo's only 7. Mom," Alice sighed. "Why do you always make a scene?" Miranda stepped forward, her face a mask of concern that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Should we call a doctor?" she asked, though the question seemed directed at Thomas rather than at Celine. "She can treat it after the party," Thomas said dismissively. "Celine, please don't ruin your grandson's birthday. The guests are all here." Celine stood frozen, the pain radiating from her chest competing with the ache in her heart. This was it, the moment decades in the making, the moment when she finally saw with perfect clarity just how little they valued her. Without a word, she turned and walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, and into the cool afternoon air. For the first time in 40 years, Celine put herself first. The urgent care center was mercifully quiet for a Saturday afternoon. Celine sat on the examination table, wincing as the nurse gently removed her blouse to assess the damage. "This is a second-degree burn, ma'am," the nurse said, her brow furrowed with concern. "I'm going to call Dr. Patel, our burn specialist." Dr. Patel, a woman with kind eyes and a gentle touch, examined the angry red patch spreading across Celine's chest. "You'll need specialized care for this," she explained, applying a cooling gel to the wound. "Burns can easily become infected if not properly treated." "Will it? Will it leave a scar?" Celine asked, her voice small. "Possibly, yes, but with proper treatment, we can minimize scarring." Dr. Patel paused, studying Celine's face. "May I ask how this happened?" Celine hesitated. "My grandson was playing in the kitchen. It was an accident." "I see." Dr. Patel exchanged a glance with the nurse. "And your family, did they bring you here?" "No, I I came alone." The doctor's expression shifted slightly. "Mrs. Carmichael, I'm required to ask, is everything okay at home? Do you feel safe?" Celine felt her cheeks flush. "It was genuinely an accident," she insisted. "My grandson is just a child." "I understand," Dr. Patel said gently. "But sometimes accidents reveal other patterns. Would you like to speak with our social worker?" "No, that won't be necessary," Celine said quickly. The last thing she wanted was official involvement. "I just need to take care of this burn." As the nurse dressed her wound, Celine's phone buzzed repeatedly. Text messages from Alice, missed calls from Thomas. She ignored them all until, finally, she picked up a call from Alice. "Mom, where are you? People are asking. Dad's furious." Celine closed her eyes, feeling the persistent sting beneath her bandages. "I'm at the urgent care center. Alice, I got burned. Remember." A pause. "Right, but when will you be back? The house is a mess, and Leo's cake needs to be served." The casual dismissal of her injury was the final confirmation Celine needed. "I'm not sure," she lied. "I need some time." After hanging up, Celine paid for her treatment using the credit card tied to her personal account, the one Thomas didn't know about, funded by her online teaching work. Then she asked the receptionist to call her a taxi. "Where to?" the driver asked as she slid into the back seat. Careful not to disturb her bandages, Celine hesitated for only a moment. "Downtown Hilton, please." In the privacy of her hotel room, Celine gingerly removed her blouse and studied her bandaged chest in the bathroom mirror. The nurse had said she'd need to change the dressing daily, apply antibiotic ointment, and watch for signs of infection. Just more caretaking. Except this time, the care was for herself. She sat on the edge of the bed, scrolling through her phone. More missed calls. A text from Thomas. "Don't be dramatic. Come home." Dramatic. How many times had he used that word to dismiss her feelings? How many times had Alice learned to echo it? Celine placed her phone on the nightstand and opened her laptop instead. In the search bar, she typed, "Divorce after 60. What to know?" As articles filled the screen, a strange calm settled over her. This wasn't impulsive. It was 40 years overdue. Pineville wasn't a random choice. Before marrying Thomas, Celine had spent summers here with her grandmother. The small town held memories of a time when she had felt truly free, before responsibilities and expectations had gradually eroded her sense of self. It also happened to have a branch of the bank where she kept her secret account, making it easier to access her funds without Thomas's knowledge. 3 days after leaving, Celine stepped off the bus onto Pineville's Main Street. The town had grown since her childhood visits, but still maintained its charm, locally owned shops, a small community park, and familiar faces that didn't immediately recognize her. Her first stop was Morgan and Associates, a small law firm recommended by the urgent care nurse M. The receptionist led her to a cramped office where Curtis Morgan, A paralegal with rimless glasses and a kind smile listened attentively as Celine explained her situation. Mrs. Carmichael, I won't sugarcoat this divorce at your age after a long marriage can be complicated, Curtis said, making notes. But you do have rights. You mentioned you were a teacher. Yes, for 20 years. I took early retirement to help when our daughter had Leo, but I've been teaching online part-time for the past 5 years. Curtis nodded. Good. That shows ongoing economic contribution. And you managed the household for 40 years. Cooking, cleaning, childcare. Yes, Thomas always said it was my job since he was the primary breadwinner. Those non-financial contributions have value under the law. Do you have documentation of your joint assets, house deed bank statements? Celine reached into her purse and withdrew a USB drive. I've been keeping digital copies of important documents for years. Just in case. Curtis's eyebrows rose slightly as he accepted the drive. Forward thinking. That will help significantly. After the consultation, Celine found a modest motel on the outskirts of town. The room was clean if a bit dated, but it was something she could afford while figuring out her next steps. She carefully changed her bandages, wincing at the sight of the angry red skin beneath. The following day, she visited Pineville Community Bank to access her personal account. The balance wasn't substantial $17,432.86, but it represented 5 years of squirreling away small amounts from her online teaching, enough to get by temporarily. That afternoon, she answered a call from Alice. Mom, this isn't funny anymore. Dad says if you don't come home, he'll cut you off financially. Celine felt a flicker of fear followed by resolve. I have some savings. Alice. And I'm entitled to half of our marital assets. What you're talking like? Like you're not coming back. Alice's voice cracked slightly. I don't think I am, Celine admitted, feeling a strange liberation in saying the words aloud. But what about Leo? He's been asking for you. And Miranda? She's still here. Mom? She's taking over everything. The mention of Miranda sent a pang through Celine's chest that had nothing to do with her burn. I love Leo, and I'll always be his grandmother. But I can't come back to that house, Alice. Not after 40 years of being treated like I'm disposable. After hanging up, Celine sat on the edge of the motel bed, feeling both lighter and heavier at once. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in decades, it was hers to choose. In the coming days, Celine established a routine. Ya sazón. Mornings at the local cafe, where a woman named Marisol served the best pastries in town. Afternoons searching for more permanent housing. Evenings researching divorce proceedings. She found a small triplex apartment with affordable rent, close to the town center. Her new neighbor, Hank Wilson, was a retired postal worker with snow-white hair pulled into a neat ponytail and a penchant for folk music that drifted through the walls. They met when she was struggling to carry a second-hand table up the steps to her unit. Need a hand, he called, already moving to help before she could answer. Thank you, Celine said, grateful for the kindness of a stranger. New to Pineville? Hank asked, setting the table down in her sparse living room. Returning. Actually, I spent summers here as a girl. Hank nodded, not prying further. Well, welcome back. If you need anything, I'm right next door. Apartment 2B. Such a simple interaction. Yet it left Celine feeling seen in a way she rarely had been in her own home. As Hank left, she looked around her small apartment, just a sofa, the table, and a few essentials purchased from the thrift store. It was nothing like the spacious house she'd left behind, but already it felt more like home. 2 weeks after arriving in Pineville, Celine stood in front of Hair to Stay, a small salon tucked between a bookstore and a hardware shop on Main Street. Her hair had been the same for decades, shoulder length, silver, usually pulled back into a conservative bun because Thomas thought anything else was trying too hard. A bell chimed as she pushed open the door. The stylist, a woman in her 40s named Janine, with vibrant purple tips in her curly black hair, greeted her warmly. "What can I do for you today?" Janine asked, leading Celine to a chair. Celine met her own eyes in the mirror. "Something completely different," she said, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. "Something that feels like me." 90 minutes later, Celine barely recognized the woman staring back at her. Her hair was now a rich mocha color with subtle caramel highlights, cut into a stylish bob that framed her face and accentuated her cheekbones. She looked younger, more vibrant, and nothing like the woman Thomas had molded over 4 decades. "What do you think?" Janine asked, watching Celine's reaction in the mirror. Celine touched the soft waves with trembling fingers. "I love it," she whispered, tears pricking at her eyes. "I absolutely love it." Back in her apartment, Celine carefully removed the bandages from her chest. The burn was healing, the angry red fading to pink. But Dr. Patel had been right. There would be a scar. Somehow, that seemed fitting, a permanent reminder of the moment everything changed. Her phone buzzed with a text from Curtis. "Documents filed. Thomas has been served notice. Be prepared for his reaction." Celine felt a flutter of anxiety. Thomas had never been physically violent, but his anger could be cold and cutting. Sure enough, barely an hour later, her phone rang with his number. "What the hell is this? Celine?" Thomas's voice was low and dangerous. "I believe the documents explain themselves," she replied, amazed at how steady she sounded. "A divorce after 40 years. What is wrong with you?" The volume increased with each question. "Nothing is wrong with me, Thomas. That's what I finally realized. If you think you're getting half of everything, you're delusional. You haven't worked in years." Celine took a deep breath. "Actually, I have been working, and more importantly, I've been contributing to our marriage in ways that are recognized under the law. Curtis can explain the details to your attorney." The silence that followed was more satisfying than any retort. Finally, Thomas spoke again, his voice cold. "Miranda was right about you. You've always been selfish. Underneath it all." The line went dead, leaving Celine with an unexpected sense of peace. If standing up for herself after decades of neglect made her selfish, then perhaps it was time to embrace the label. That evening, she received a text from a number she didn't recognize. "Grandma, it's Leo. I borrowed Dad's phone. I'm sorry about the hot water. Please come home." The innocence of the message brought tears to her eyes. Leo was just a child caught in adult complications. She responded carefully. "I love you very much, Leo. The accident wasn't your fault. I just need some time to myself right now. I'll see you soon. I promise." As she lay in bed that night, Celine thought about the woman she had been just weeks ago, afraid to speak up, afraid to take up space, afraid to want anything for herself. The burn on her chest throbbed slightly, a physical manifestation of her awakening. Some wounds, it seemed, were necessary to break free. 3 weeks after Celine's departure, Alice's silver SUV pulled into the parking lot of Marisol's Cafe, where Celine was enjoying her morning coffee. Celine watched through the window as Alice helped Leo out of the car, the boy's green-streaked hair unmistakable even from a distance. Celine's heart raced. She hadn't expected to see them here, hadn't prepared for this moment. Before she could decide whether to slip out the back, the bell above the door chimed, and Leo's eyes found hers. "Grandma," he cried, breaking free from Alice's grip and running toward her. He stopped short just before reaching her table, suddenly uncertain. Celine smiled gently. Hello, sweetheart? Alice approached more cautiously, her pink streaked undercut partially hidden beneath a beanie. Mom, she said, her voice a complex mixture of relief and apprehension. We've been looking everywhere for you. How did you find me? Celine asked, gesturing for them to sit. Dad's attorney mentioned Pineville in some documents. I remembered you talking about coming here as a girl. Alice's eyes scanned Celine's face, widening slightly at her changed appearance. Your hair. It's different. A lot of things are different now, Celine replied, unconsciously touching her new style. Leo fidgeted in his seat. Are you mad at me, Grandma? He asked in a small voice. Celine's heart clenched. No, sweetie, I could never be mad at you. The accident wasn't your fault. Then why did you leave? His lower lip trembled. Celine glanced at Alice, wondering how to explain complex adult relationships to a 7-year-old. Sometimes grown-ups need space to figure things out, she said carefully. It has nothing to do with you. Leo, I love you very much. Alice cleared her throat. Mom, can we talk privately? Marisol approached with perfect timing. Can I get anything for our new guests? She asked, smiling warmly at Leo. Hot chocolate, please, Leo replied, momentarily distracted. Make that too, Alice added, and maybe some cookies for the little guy. Once Leo was happily occupied with his treat and a coloring book Marisol provided, Alice leaned forward, lowering her voice. Dad's a mess, she began. He's angry all the time. And Miranda, they had a huge fight last week. She's gone. Celine raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She called him manipulative, said he was just using her to get back at you. Alice twisted her napkin nervously. I think she was right, and it made me wonder, has he always been like this? The question hung in the air between them. Celine considered her answer carefully. Your father has many good qualities, Alice, but yes, he's always needed to control everything and everyone around him, including me. Alice's eyes filled with tears. I didn't see it, or maybe I didn't want to see it, but the way he's been acting since you left, it's like a different person, except maybe it's not. Maybe this is who he's always been, and I just had you as a buffer. Celine reached across the table and took her daughter's hand. We often don't see the patterns we're caught in until something breaks them. Like a burn, Alice said quietly, glancing at Celine's chest. Like a burn, Celine agreed. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken history between them. Then Alice squeezed Celine's hand. I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't realize how bad it was. And when the accident happened, I should have been more concerned about you. Celine felt a knot in her throat loosen slightly. Thank you for saying that. Will you come back? Alice asked, hope flickering in her eyes. Celine shook her head gently. No, sweetheart. I can't go back to that life. But that doesn't mean I'm out of your life or Leo's. Dad says you're trying to take half of everything. He's fighting the divorce. Alice's voice dropped even lower. I'm only asking for what's fair after 40 years of marriage. Celine replied, and your father can fight all he wants, but the law is clear on this. Leo looked up from his coloring. Grandma, can I see where you live now? Celine smiled at him, grateful for the interruption. Of course you can. It's not very fancy, but it's my own space. As they walked to Celine's apartment, Leo skipping ahead while Alice and Celine followed, Alice spoke again. I've been thinking about what you said, about Dad always needing control. I think he does the same thing to me, always questioning my decisions about Leo, about my career, about everything. Celine nodded. It's a pattern, Alice, and patterns can be hard to break, but not impossible. When they reached the triplex, Hank was outside watering a small garden patch. He waved, his eyes curious but respectful. My neighbor, Hank, Celine explained. Hank, this is my daughter Alice and my grandson Leo. Pleased to meet you, Hank said, tipping an imaginary hat. Your mom's a good neighbor. Inside the apartment, Leo explored with the unbridled curiosity of childhood, while Alice took in the simple furnishings, the small kitchen, the framed photo of herself and Leo that Celine had brought with her. It's small, Alice said, but it suits you somehow. It's just the beginning, Celine replied. I'm figuring out what comes next. When it was time for them to leave, Leo hugged Celine tightly. Can I come back? Anytime, Celine promised, kissing the top of his head. Alice hesitated at the door. Mom, about the divorce. If you need any help with Dad, or anything really, I'm here. Celine felt warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with her healing burn. That means a lot, Alice, more than you know. As she watched them drive away, Celine realized she had crossed an important threshold. For the first time, Alice had seen her not just as a mother, but as a person in her own right. It was a small victory, but a significant one. The idea came to Celine one morning as she sat in Marisol's cafe, watching the easy flow of customers and the warm interactions between Marisol and her regulars. What if she could create a space like this, a place of comfort and connection, before marriage had consumed her identity? Celine had been passionate about two things, teaching and cooking. Her online teaching provided some income, but the hours were odd due to time zone differences. A cafe would allow her to combine her love of food with the educational aspect of creating a community space. Do you think it's crazy? Celine asked Marisol one afternoon, sharing her nascent idea. Starting a business at my age? Marisol wiped her hands on her apron, her dark curls bouncing as she shook her head. Not crazy at all. Brave, yes, but not crazy. I don't have restaurant experience, Celine admitted. But you have life experience, Marisol countered. And from what you've told me, you've been managing a household for decades. That's not so different from running a small business. Encouraged, Celine enrolled in a small business basics course at the Pineville Community Center. Twice a week, she joined a dozen other aspiring entrepreneurs to learn about business plans, permits, and financial projections. At 65, she was the oldest in the class, but her teaching background made her a natural at absorbing and organizing information. The financial aspect proved the most challenging. Her personal savings wouldn't be enough to launch even a small cafe. The divorce proceedings were moving forward, but it could be months before any settlement was reached. In the meantime, she needed startup capital. Have you considered a small business loan? Curtis suggested during one of their meetings about the divorce. Your credit score is excellent, and with your teaching background, you have a stable income history. Celine had never taken out a loan in her own name before. Thomas had always handled major financial decisions, often reminding her that his business acumen was why they lived comfortably. The thought of walking into a bank and asking for money was terrifying and exhilarating. To her surprise, Pineville Community Bank approved her for a modest loan, enough to lease a small storefront and purchase the essential equipment. The space she found was on a side street just off the main square, a former bookstore with large windows and good foot traffic. It needs work, Maureen, the real estate agent, admitted as they toured the empty space. But the bones are good, and the rent is reasonable. Celine walked the perimeter, envisioning small tables, a counter with fresh pastries, bookshelves along one wall where customers could browse or borrow while they enjoyed their coffee. A gathering place that was both cozy and intellectually stimulating, the kind of place she would have loved to find when she first arrived in Pineville. Word of her venture spread quickly in the small town. Hank offered to help with basic repairs, revealing a past career in carpentry before the Postal Service. Marisol introduced Celine to reliable local suppliers for coffee beans and baking ingredients. A young art student from the community college volunteered to design menus and signage in exchange for free coffee during study sessions. For the first time in her life, Celine was building something entirely her own, making decisions without seeking anyone else's approval. The burn on her chest was healing nicely now, pink scar tissue replacing the angry red wound. Sometimes she caught herself touching it absently while making plans for the cafe, a reminder of both pain and freedom. When the building inspector signed off on the final renovations, Celine stood in the center of the empty cafe and allowed herself a moment of pride. The walls were painted a warm cream, the trim a deep blue. Second-hand tables and chairs had been refinished and arranged invitingly. Bookshelves salvaged from the previous business lined one wall, already stocked with donated books. All she needed now was a name. She considered and discarded dozens of options before settling on Moonrise Cafe, a nod to her own name. Celine, which meant moon in Greek, a new moon rising. Indeed, the envelope from Curtis arrived on a Tuesday, marked urgent. Inside was a copy of Thomas's response to the divorce filing a detailed rejection of her claims to marital assets. He's claiming that since you abandoned the marital home without cause, Curtis had written in his accompanying note, "You're not entitled to an equal division of property. It's a standard tactic, but we need to respond forcefully." Celine sank onto her sofa, the paper trembling in her hands. Thomas had always been strategic, especially when he felt threatened. Still, the coldly legalistic language denying her contributions to their 40-year marriage felt like a slap. The document listed their assets, the house, valued at $485,000, Thomas's retirement accounts, totaling nearly $750,000, investment portfolios, 2 cars, and various personal property. At the bottom, a handwritten note in Thomas's familiar scrawl. She contributed nothing financially. She gets nothing. Celine closed her eyes, fighting back tears of anger. Nothing. 40 years of managing their household, raising their daughter, supporting his career, putting her own aspirations on hold, all of it counted for nothing in his eyes. When she called Curtis, her voice was steady despite her churning emotions. "What do we do now? We fight," Curtis said simply. "We document your contributions, both financial and non-financial. We get statements from your online teaching job. We demonstrate that you maintained the household while he built his career. And we request a mandatory mediation session." Over the following weeks, Celine meticulously gathered evidence of her contributions to the marriage, bank statements showing deposits from her teaching work, records of household expenses she had managed, photos of family events she had orchestrated. Alice even provided a written statement confirming that Celine had been the primary caregiver for Leo during his early years, allowing Alice to return to work. The mediation was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in the county courthouse. Celine dressed carefully in a tailored navy suit she'd found at a consignment shop, her mocha-colored hair framing her face in soft waves. As she applied a light layer of makeup, she realized she was dressing not to please Thomas, but to project her own confidence. Thomas was already seated in the mediation room when she arrived, his attorney beside him. He looked thinner than she remembered, the lines around his mouth deeper. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Celine was surprised to see uncertainty flicker across his face before his expression hardened again. The mediator, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s, outlined the process, emphasizing that her role was not to judge, but to facilitate an agreement. Thomas's attorney spoke first, reiterating the claims that Celine had abandoned the marriage and contributed minimally to their assets. When it was Curtis's turn, he methodically presented their evidence financial records, Alice's statement, documentation of the online teaching job, and most powerfully, a detailed accounting of the unpaid labor Celine had provided over 4 decades. If Mr. Carmichael had needed to hire a housekeeper, cook, nanny, social secretary, and personal assistant to provide the services that Mrs. Carmichael provided, it would have cost approximately $82,000 annually in today's dollars. Curtis concluded. Multiplied over 40 years, that's a contribution of nearly $3.3 million to the marriage. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His attorney whispered something to him, but he shook his head sharply. Additionally, Curtis continued, Mrs. Carmichael has provided evidence of injury sustained in the marital home shortly before her departure, a second-degree burn requiring medical attention, for which she received inadequate support from Mr. Carmichael. That was an accident involving their grandson. Thomas's attorney interjected. The injury was accidental. Curtis agreed. The neglectful response was not. By the end of the 3-hour session, it was clear that Thomas's position had weakened considerably. The mediator strongly recommended that they consider a standard equal division of marital assets to avoid a costly court battle that Thomas was likely to lose. Outside the courthouse, Thomas approached Celine as she waited for her taxi. You've changed, he said, his tone somewhere between accusatory and bewildered. Celine met his gaze calmly. No, Thomas, I've remembered who I was all along. He glanced away, his jaw working. Is there any chance? He began, then stopped. Never mind. My attorney will contact Curtis about the settlement. As he walked away, Celine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. For 40 years, she had molded herself to fit his expectations, shrinking her own desires and needs to avoid his disapproval. No more. Whatever the outcome of the divorce, she had already claimed her most important victory herself. 2 days later, Curtis called with unexpected news. Thomas has agreed to a standard equal division, he reported, sounding pleasantly surprised. His attorney says he wants to avoid a prolonged legal battle and negative publicity. Publicity, Celine repeated, confused. Apparently, he's concerned about how it would look to his business associates if it came out that he neglected your medical care after a serious burn, Curtis explained. Self-interest, as usual, but it works in our favor. The settlement would give Celine half of their retirement savings, a cash payment for her share of the house, and a fair division of personal property, financial security she had never imagined when she first walked out the door. What changed his mind? Do you think? She asked Curtis after reviewing the proposed settlement. Hard to say, Curtis replied. Sometimes people surprise you, or maybe he just realized he couldn't win. Celine suspected it was the latter. Thomas had always been pragmatic about cutting his losses. Still, as she signed the preliminary agreement, she felt no triumph, only relief that this chapter was finally closing. The week before Moonrise Cafe's soft opening was a blur of activity. Coffee machines were installed and tested. Refrigerated display cases arrived for pastries. A part-time barista, a college student named Zoe, with bright blue hair and an encyclopedic knowledge of coffee, was hired and trained. Celine had developed a small menu of homemade pastries and light lunch options, focusing on quality over quantity. Each evening, she baked in the cafe's compact kitchen, perfecting recipes and adjusting seasonings. The physical work was tiring, but it filled her with purpose. Not everything went smoothly. The espresso machine malfunctioned 2 days before opening, requiring an emergency repair. A supplier delivered the wrong coffee beans. The vintage cash register Celine had lovingly restored refused to open reliably. Each setback was met with unexpected support. The repair technician squeezed in an after-hours visit when he heard it was for a new business. Marisol lent Celine coffee beans until the correct order arrived. Hank spent an entire afternoon tinkering with the cash register until it worked properly. "You've built quite a community here," Zoe observed as they stocked the refrigerator case the night before opening. "The community was already here," Celine replied. "I'm just becoming part of it." The soft opening was scheduled for a Tuesday morning, intentionally low-key to work out any kinks before the weekend rush. Celine arrived at 5:00 a.m., her stomach fluttering with nerves and excitement. She moved through her new space, turning on lights, warming ovens, brewing the first pot of coffee. The aroma filled the air, rich and promising. At precisely 7:00 a.m., she flipped the sign on the door from closed to open and took a deep breath. For a terrifying 15 minutes, the cafe remained empty. Then the bell above the door chimed, and Hank stepped in, followed by an elderly woman Celine recognized from the community center. "Wouldn't miss this for the world," Hank said, beaming as he approached the counter. "I'll take a regular coffee and one of those blueberry scones that have been tempting me through the window." By mid-morning, a steady trickle of curious locals had visited, some staying to enjoy their purchases at the small tables, others taking their coffee to go. Marisol appeared during her own breakfast rush lull, ordering an espresso and declaring it perfectly balanced. Zoe handled the counter with cheerful efficiency, allowing Celine to move among the tables, introducing herself to customers, and gathering feedback. The response was overwhelmingly positive, with several people promising to return with friends. Around noon, just as the initial rush was subsiding, the door chimed again. Celine looked up to see Alice and Leo standing in the entrance, Leo clutching a small gift bag, Alice looking tentative but determined. "Surprise," Alice said softly. "We thought we'd come support the grand opening." Leo ran forward, thrusting the gift bag toward Celine. "I made this for your cafe, Grandma." Inside was a handmade sign, clearly crafted by a 7-year-old with adult supervision, that read Moonrise Cafe, surrounded by wobbly stars and a crescent moon. "It's perfect," Celine whispered, fighting back tears. "I'll put it right by the register where everyone can see it." Alice glanced around the cafe, taking in the warm colors, the comfortable seating, the bookshelves lined with used books. "Mom, this is amazing. You did all this in just a few months." "I had help," Celine replied, gesturing toward Hank, who raised his coffee cup in salute from across the room. "And I had motivation." While Leo explored the children's book corner that Celine had created specifically with him in mind, Alice leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Dad signed the final papers yesterday," she said. "It's official." Celine felt a complex wave of emotions relief. Sadness? Pride? "How is he?" Alice sighed. "Adjusting, I think. He started seeing a therapist. Believe it or not, said his doctor recommended it for his blood pressure. But I think he's finally realizing he needs to change." The news surprised Celine. In 40 years, Thomas had never admitted to needing help with anything. Perhaps there was hope for him yet, even if it was too late for their marriage. "And Miranda?" Celine couldn't help asking. "Gone for good, it seems," Alice replied. "Turns out she was just using Dad to make her ex-husband jealous. It worked, they're reconciling." Celine shook her head, thinking how strange life could be. If not for Miranda's presence that fateful day, would she have found the courage to leave? Sometimes catalysts came in unexpected forms. By closing time, Moonrise Cafe had served 47 customers, a modest success for a soft opening in a small town. Celine's feet ached, and her back was stiff, but a profound satisfaction had settled in her chest, right alongside the healing burn scar. She had created something from nothing, transformed pain into purpose. As she wiped down the last table, Zoe approached, untying her apron. "Today was awesome," the young woman declared. "I already posted about us on social media, and people are excited to check us out." "Thank you, Zoe," Celine said. "I couldn't have done this without you." After Zoe left, Celine stood in the center of her empty cafe, savoring the silence. The evening light filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor. This space was hers every decision, every color, every recipe a reflection of her own taste and judgment. No one to criticize, no one to undermine her confidence. She ran her fingers along the counter, thinking of the journey that had brought her here, from a scalding burn to a new beginning. From invisibility to independence, tomorrow would bring new challenges, but for now, she allowed herself to simply be proud. 3 days after the successful opening of Moonrise Cafe, Celine's phone rang with a number she hadn't expected to see again: Thomas. Her finger hovered over the screen, tempted to let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won out. "Hello, Thomas," she answered, keeping her voice neutral. A pause. "Celine, I heard about your cafe." She waited, unsure where this was heading. Through the phone, she could hear the familiar sounds of their old kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the clock above the stove. "Congratulations," he continued awkwardly. "Alice says it's quite nice." "Thank you," Celine replied, still wary. Another pause, longer this time. "I've been seeing someone. A therapist, I mean." His voice had an unfamiliar edge vulnerability. "Perhaps?" "It was for my blood pressure initially, but we've been talking about other things." Celine sat down at her kitchen table, unprepared for this direction. "That's good. Thomas, I'm glad. He says I have control issues," Thomas continued, a hint of his old defensiveness creeping in. "That I've been difficult to live with, despite everything." Celine felt a flash of sympathy. Thomas had always prided himself on being right, on knowing best. Admitting fault, even indirectly, must have been excruciating for him. "We received the final settlement paperwork," he said, changing the subject. "It's fair, more than fair, according to my attorney." "It's what the law provides," Celine replied. "Half of what we built together." "Yes, well," he cleared his throat. "I might have underestimated your contributions over the years." Coming from Thomas, this was as close to an apology as she was likely to get. Celine closed her eyes, thinking of all the times she had longed to hear him acknowledge her value, her work, her sacrifices. Now that he finally had, she found it meant less than she had imagined. "I was wondering," Thomas continued, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant, "if I might stop by the cafe sometime, just to see what you've built. Maybe we could talk." The request caught Celine off guard. Her first instinct was refusal, protecting her new space from the man who had diminished her for so long. But something in his tone gave her pause. Not manipulation, but genuine uncertainty. "I don't think that's a good idea right now, Thomas," she said gently. "We both need time and space to adjust to our new lives." "I understand," he replied, though disappointment was evident in his voice. "If you change your mind, I'll let you know," Celine finished. "Take care of yourself, Thomas." After hanging up, Celine sat quietly, processing the conversation. There had been a time when she would have leapt at any hint of reconciliation, eager to smooth things over, to maintain peace at any cost. That woman was gone now, replaced by someone who understood her own worth. She touched the scar on her chest, now a pale pink line, still sensitive but no longer painful. Some wounds healed cleanly, others left marks that became part of you. She was learning to embrace both kinds. The following morning, as Celine prepared to open the cafe, she noticed a small package propped against the front door. Inside was a framed photograph she had left behind, a picture of herself as a young woman, standing proudly in front of her first classroom, her face alight with purpose. A note was tucked inside. "You left this. Thought you might want it." T. Celine placed the photograph on a shelf behind the counter, a reminder of the woman she had been before and the woman she was becoming again. The anniversary party for Moonrise Cafe filled the small space with laughter and conversation. Regulars mingled with newcomers, enjoying special pastries Celine had prepared for the occasion. A handmade banner, created by Leo with considerably improved artistic skills, proclaimed, "Happy First Birthday, Moonrise." Celine moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and refilling coffee cups. At 66, she had more energy than she'd had in years. Her body strengthened by the physical demands of running a cafe, her spirit nourished by meaningful work and genuine connections. The business had found its niche in Pineville, not just a place for coffee and pastries, but a community hub where local authors gave readings, students gathered for study groups, and a weekly senior tech help session led by Zoe had become unexpectedly popular. It hadn't all been smooth sailing. The first winter had brought slow days and cash flow concerns. A pipe had burst during a cold snap, requiring emergency repairs and temporary closure. The early morning hours still sometimes felt punishing, but through each challenge, Celine had discovered reserves of resilience she hadn't known she possessed. Alice arrived midway through the celebration, her pink hair now grown out to reveal its natural brown. She hugged Celine tightly. "I'm so proud of you. Mom," she whispered. "Leo's with Dad today, but he made you this." She handed over a card covered in glitter and containing a carefully written poem about his awesome grandma who makes the best cookies. Their relationship had evolved over the past year, mother and daughter finding a healthier balance. Alice visited Pineville regularly, sometimes with Leo, sometimes alone. They talked more openly than they ever had before, working through old patterns and building new understanding. "How's your dad?" Celine asked as they found a quiet corner. "Still seeing Dr. Matthews," Alice replied, referring to Thomas's therapist. "He's different, softer around the edges. He actually apologized to me last week for being controlling about Leo's education." Celine raised her eyebrows. "That is different. He asks about you sometimes," Alice added carefully. "Not in a pining way, just interested in how you're doing." Celine nodded, feeling neither anger nor yearning at the mention of her ex-husband, just a quiet acknowledgement of a shared past and separate futures. Hank approached, carrying a small gift wrapped in blue paper. Over the past year, he had become a fixture at the cafe, handling minor repairs and gradually revealing himself to be a man of surprising depth, a published poet in his youth, a devoted father to grown children scattered across the country, a passionate advocate for environmental causes. "For the cafe's birthday," he said, presenting the package to Celine, "a dessert Cécile." Inside was a handcrafted wooden sign for the door. The words "open" and "closed" carved on opposite sides within a crescent moon design. "I've been working on it for weeks," Hank admitted, a slight blush coloring his weathered cheeks. "Wanted it to be perfect." "It's beautiful," Celine said, genuinely touched. Their friendship had deepened over shared morning coffees and evening walks by the lake, neither of them rushing toward definitions or commitments, content to let whatever was between them unfold naturally. As the party wound down and the last guests departed, Celine stood in the doorway of her cafe, Hank's new sign hanging proudly on the glass. The afternoon sun cast a golden glow over Pineville's main street, the familiar buildings now feeling truly like home. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, burned, broken, but bravely stepping into the unknown. The scar on her chest had faded to a thin white line, visible only if you knew to look for it. Some days she forgot it was there entirely. What hadn't faded was her commitment to living authentically, to honoring her own needs alongside those of others, to believing that new beginnings were possible at any age. Celine turned the sign to closed and stepped back inside, where Hank and Alice were helping clear the last of the celebration debris. This was her life now, imperfect, sometimes challenging, but entirely her own. She touched her mocha-colored hair, styled in a textured bob that framed her face perfectly, so different from the severe bun she had worn for decades to please Thomas. Such a small change, yet symbolic of everything that had shifted within her. "Ready for year two?" Hank asked, coming to stand beside her. Celine smiled, looking around at the cafe she had created from nothing but hope and determination, the bookshelves lined with stories of adventure and transformation, the tables where people connected over steaming cups and shared confidences, the counter where she stood each morning, serving not just coffee but possibility. "More than ready," she replied. And in that moment, with the sun warming her back and the future wide open before her, Celine knew it was true. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was walk away from what hurt you. And sometimes the most rewarding journey began with a wound that forced you to finally put yourself first. Her new life hadn't been easy to build, but it was hers every choice, every struggle, every joy. She had discovered, at 66, what some people never learned: it was never too late to begin again.